These are the facts, not put out by mainstream media. If you want to know the truth, we put out the truth every single day, Monday to Friday. So if you want to know the truth, come to charlieward.com and see real news daily. And join the Insiders Club, which is live on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Hello, Dylan. How are you?
Hello, Charlie. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Life is good.
That's good to hear.
Life is good, if not a little bit crazy, but I don't mind that at all. But for me, it's a real pleasure to have Dylan here because he's put so much work into mapping out things. And as we go through a time which a lot of people would call utterly crazy, to have somebody behind the scenes who's mapped everything out so that you can work out, in very simple terms, join up the dots. Because things always add up when you know what numbers and what figures and what things are involved. So where are we at the moment, Dylan, with everything? Because you're constantly updating and creating new maps of direction and design. Where are we at right now?
It's true. I am always updating, actually. And well, where I'm at personally is we're actually in the process of moving our headquarters. And so that has been occupying me for about the past 2 months. And we're coming down to the end of my lease July 1st. So we will be moving to a more secure location where all these paper poster maps will have better climate control and safer parking. Because where we're at currently, I have been sideswiped and my car broken into and a gun stolen. So we're trying to secure things down for the future, whatever may be coming in this storm. But my newest one is still, you see behind me. I had to move myself a little bit because the sun was right in my face when I was where I normally am. But my newest one is still the sovereignty certificate, which I showed you the last time, but we didn't get a chance to really talk about. So I think we could go through that one a little bit today.
I think that would be good.
And then maybe even the pyramid one a little bit, because that's the one that's really been selling a lot this year, and it's gone viral online quite a bit this year. It's being shared a lot throughout X and stuff, not always attributed to me. So it's good to remind people who actually created these things so that they can find my site and find all of them, find the archive of all of them. And of course, we offer a lot of these as free downloads. And I also do video explanations of a lot of them on my channel, New Templars. But, it all started with this one. If you guys, anyone new to this, this was the first one that came out back in 2018 that was a timeline of all the hidden history, really focused on the CIA, and ended sort of with Trump's executive order, that big one about human rights and confiscating their property of those who had violated the human rights at the end of 2017. And then this one came out in 2018. So that's when this timeline ended. And then a lot of my other diagrams have sort of split off of that one, exploring different specific topics in there. And so that's what I've been up to. And of course, following the news, definitely want to talk about some of the current events with you today, Charlie, from the UFC fight to Trump's current seemingly pivot on Israel, which is quite confirming of what a lot of us in the truth movement have been saying is coming. And Iran, and what actually came out recently in UK with the rape gang inquiry report has been shocking to a lot of us. And that combined with Juneteenth here in America and the opening of the Obama Center. So there's a lot going on, a lot to discuss. And in terms of my next map, I haven't actually started on the next one yet, but that is coming very soon here after this move is complete. The move from the warehouse has really taken up a lot of my time for the past 2 months, but I'm really eager to get back to creating more maps if there's anything left to map. So, some of us thought this whole process would be more like wrapping up by July 4th this year with the 250 celebrations. However, it seems like it will be continuing past that, at least until we get the major arrests publicly disclosed. But we're going to keep monitoring, and there are very positive signs, I believe, that we've seen just even this year, indicating the direction that things are going in. And of course, the most positive, even just recently, with Trump's statements at the G7 about Israel, combined with J.D. Vance's statements at the White House earlier this week. So things are moving right along.
No, I couldn't agree more. And it's very, very interesting for me because I'm in a position where I've just finished writing a book about what happened between 2019 and 2026. And I had to do some pretty deep soul searching to see whether what I saw in 2019 and 2020 was happening in real time, or whether I had the ability to move into the future and see what was going to happen. Now looking back, because I see it happening now, it feels so real. But I saw all of this happening in 2019, 2020, 2021. And God put me in positions whereby I saw everything. But now I'm questioning myself as to whether I time traveled it from then to now, because everything I saw then is happening now. Or did I see it now and now it's being shown to the world now? That I don't know. But I find it very, very interesting. And I also found it very interesting that it became very, very clear and without question clear, because I've cross-referenced it with God so many times about Donald Trump. Donald Trump didn't come to save the world. He just came to get in the way, to stir the pot, to give us time to stand up for ourselves. Because the only person that's going to save Dylan and Charlie is Dylan and Charlie. It's not going to be Donald Trump. It's not going to be J.D. Vance. It's not going to be Starmer. It's not going to be any of them. It's going to be us individually. But what has happened is Donald Trump has got in the way to give us a chance. And one particular person who we used to speak a lot has suddenly decided to attack me. Well, I don't particularly mind that because I've been attacked a lot. And suggesting that Donald Trump is part of the swamp. Well, in a certain sense, he is, because he's dismantling it from within. He's had to go into it to dismantle it. And he's probably the only person on the planet that's balls are big enough to do that. And none more so than having a son-in-law that's pretty damn close, who's an out-and-out Zionist. And to go along with Israel and pretend that he's their best friend for so long to find out what's going on, he was prepared to do it. And there's a reason he was prepared to do it, because he answered the calling of God. And not the God that certain people worship, but God the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. That God, the God that I love, the God that I communicate with on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. And it's very important that we know that, because I said the other day that Israel are God's chosen people. The trouble is with Israel being God's chosen people, their God is not the same God as mine. Their God is Satan. Because my God doesn't steal land, doesn't steal houses, doesn't kill children, doesn't kill women. My God doesn't kill individuals, whoever they are. That's not my God. I know that. I know that factually. God gave life. He didn't give death. Satan gives death. So that made it very clear to me as to what was going on here. So we're going through a period right now that if you're living in the third dimension, you may well think that Trump's a bad guy. But when you move up into the fourth dimension and the fifth dimension, as you go through the different levels of consciousness, you start to see what's really going on. And thanks to people like Dylan, he's put it down on paper. For those people who actually need to see something to work out the logic of what's happening. Now, there are so many people out there that I'm so grateful for, and Dylan by far is one of the top ones, where everything then makes sense because it's on paper, it's logical, it's in front of you. I can deal with it emotionally. I can deal with it because I get that feeling. I know it's right, I know it's wrong. And I thank you, Dylan, for what you've done. I'm going to hand over to you now to show what your current work is. It's unbelievable. It's absolutely brilliant. But what it does is all the dots that I put out there, Dylan has put lines between them so that you can see them.
Indeed. And one of the great things about putting it all on one piece of paper is that the deep state or the censors or Meta or whoever can't come in and try to censor one aspect of it. That, you know, because I compile all of it, and so they can't go in and say, well, we want to remove this group from this artwork, and so that it's not there anymore, like this, say, Zionist group or the Jesuit group or the Masonic group. It's all just there in that one piece of paper, so they can't kind of like butter it or like censor part of it. It's the original vision, you know, not saying every diagram I've put together is necessarily perfect and complete of all the information out there in the universe, but it's at least as complete and full as I could get it at that point in my own research. And of course, my research has expanded over the past 10 years, which is why I've created so many more diagrams over that time. And so let's, I guess, kick it off with the one that was actually inspired by your expo, Charlie, at Trump Doral, May 2025, which was this one right behind me. My head's covering it now because I had to move because the sun was in my eyes over there, but the sovereignty certificate. So let me make sure I can do a screen share here. All right, so this is the sovereignty certificate. Once again, I got a download, like a vision for the basic premise of this diagram jumped into my mind at the Trump Doral at your expo, Charlie, after hearing all those wonderful speakers that you had speaking about different sovereignty subjects. And I was already on my agenda to do an infographic about sovereignty prior to that expo. But hearing all those different speakers and then just getting the actual download, the vision of what it should look like or how it should be laid out was what really prompted me to start the diagram. And so just to briefly walk you through the different parts of this diagram and what it's really saying here. Obviously, the look of it is inspired by paper currency, which has always been a fascination of mine, is the intricacy of the intaglio engraving process and paper currency in general, how it's made, how it has these patterns that none of us can really replicate by hand, intended to be anti-counterfeiting measures, obviously. But even just looking into the details of the portraiture, actually, in art, I started actually in portraiture, and getting really into portraiture and doing different various distortions and like effects on portraiture, but always looking at the portraits on currency and looking at the fine lines that kind of contour the faces of our different presidents really fascinated me as like a type of kind of like a contour line drawing, but it's done through an intaglio engraving process. So I wanted to replicate that. It was sort of my biggest technical challenge as well as one of my biggest informational challenges of how do we become sovereign? How do we defeat this system that's designed to enslave us and make us ignorant and force us to pay these taxes our entire life and keep us in whatever class we were born into, whether that's, a poverty, like a welfare class, or the middle class, which they're trying to get rid of and move everyone into the poverty class, or the upper class, which seems to, you've heard the expression, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, is really the system we've been living in, which I believe all that's going to change very soon. We've discussed the Jassara map in the past. I do believe that we're coming into a new financial system, but what can we do in the meantime to elevate our position, to remove ourselves from this rigged legal framework that we have been born into? So the sovereignty certificate, one of the main features that we probably won't go through today, we're just going to do a brief overview of the diagram, but is a glossary on these top two sections on the left and the right. This is a glossary of all the different terms from sovereignty itself to jurisdiction to things like allodial title, property tax, a lot of different terms and terminology that you can look through. And of course, you could have a whole dictionary of that, but this is just to give you guys a sampling of terms to be familiar with when discussing subjects about sovereignty. And then in terms of the illustrations and how this diagram is laid out, in the bottom left corner is an illustration that represents the straw man. And that's the lowest level of enlightenment on this chart. It's essentially the NPC. This is the state that the majority of us are born into. It requires a conscious break from conformity to then move up to the upper left illustration, which is the off-gridder. And there's a lot of symbolism built into that sovereignty illustration. We'll zoom in here for a second to show, it's essentially showing you like a businessman working in a corporate office environment. Essentially, you see chains sort of swirling around him. He's being bribed with money. And then this figure behind him that sort of looks like, I think, like Mr. Atomic from The Watchers was the inspiration, is meant to represent his straw man, his corporate legal identity, you know, his name in all capital letters. It represents a corporation, and how he's essentially being enslaved and his life energy harvested in this 9-to-5 setup that he finds himself in. So the next step beyond that is essentially realizing you're in that system, having your energy harvested and becoming the off-gridder, which you see here with a nice little illustration. By the way, these illustrations started as pencil drawings by myself and then moved into like Grok rendering, or then moved into Illustrator renderings done by myself by hand, and then moved into Grok renderings based on those Illustrator renderings, and then finally Midjourney renderings. So this is like 3 stages of handwork and 2 stages of AI, and many generations within the Midjourney as well. And so it was quite a process. But this diagram, I did actually use AI for some of the intaglio engraving work that would have taken thousands of hours, but we essentially, AI helped us speed it up quite a bit. And so I was grateful for AI for that process. But so this illustration represents the off-gridder, which is a man who rejects the beast system and chooses to live outside of it. Now, there's a few different strategies you can do to sort of achieve that. One of them mentioned in the diagram is burying a relative on your land to make it untaxable, and having your land then essentially being jurisdicted as a cemetery, which is one of the 501c3 options to alleviate you from property tax. And by the way, none of this is legal advice. And part of the process in making this diagram was trying to decide if I was going to implement these strategies before or after creating this diagram. And I decided to go with finishing the diagram first and then maybe pursuing some of these strategies myself. But anyways, the off-gridder sort of trades convenience for sovereignty. When you're sort of living in the mountains or whatever off-grid, you're missing out on some of the amenities of modern society, but you are living in a more free environment. However, things in this illustration, there's levels of depth in these illustrations that, like, the more you look, the more you'll notice things. You see here, like, there's like a tiny little government predator drone that's kind of hunting him down up in these mountains up here, which sort of reminds you that as sovereign as you can be off-grid, whoever has the more advanced technology, whoever's really owning the country that you're in, may ultimately hold the jurisdiction. So a lot of the sovereigns that I hear about speaking about sovereignty, sort of in the truth movement, they sort of veer towards this route of kind of really breaking away from the system, establishing your homestead off-grid, whatnot, being energy and food independent. But at the end of the day, that really only gets you so far. If, say, in a Waco, Texas type scenario, Branch Davidian type scenario, they may have everything in their little compound, but ultimately they're on a government's land. And if the government decides to get involved and intervene, with force, with physical military force, there's really not much they can do. And so I think a lot of people...
Just on that point, it's very interesting for the audience with what you alluded to just now. Donald Trump back in 2022 buried his first wife, Ivana Trump, at the Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, which automatically then made that whole premises tax-free. And of course, the left kicked up a huge fuss about it. But he was doing that to show the world that you can do this, and you can do this totally within the law. And all the haters are like, well, you've made your whole business, your whole golf course tax-free. That's wrong. Well, it's not. It's legally possible to do this. And for anybody who's known me for the last 45 years, I've lived my life tax-free for 43 years because of where I've based my office. It was in Gibraltar for 10 years because it was tax-free, and then it was in Zug, Z-U-G, in Switzerland for 10 years because that was tax-free. And then for the last 23 years, it's been in Dubai because it's tax-free. It's within the law. People say, well, you have to pay your taxes, Charlie. Do you? The last thing I want to do is pay my taxes. when suddenly you find out 400 billion has gone missing that was sent by the US to Ukraine. Nobody knows where it's gone. The Ukraine can't explain where it's gone. The US who sent it can't explain where it's gone. But I'll tell you one thing. I've helped over 250,000 people out of homelessness over 40 years. I can show you where they are. I would much rather help people and know where the money's going than give it to a government that's fighting wars that have nothing to do with you. And I'll tell you what, without being arrogant, I bet if I gave you a pen and a map, 80% of the Americans couldn't tell me where Ukraine was. Let alone Israel. Because most of them, and I'm not talking about my audience are intelligent. But I tell you what, I've seen interviews recently during the World Cup of American people talking, we're talking about football mentality, talking to other football supporters from other parts of the world, and they haven't got a clue where they come from. Not a clue. Not a clue. So the fact that you're paying your taxes, yeah, makes you feel good. Might do, might not. My audience probably not. But the truth is, there's so many things that you don't need to do, and you don't need to be funding a war that shouldn't even happen. So Donald Trump has shown you that you could, and I'm sure there's a number of my audience here, because I know a number of them are divorced or single. You could bury your ex-husband in your garden and make your house tax-free. Just a thought. I'm not here to give you legal advice, but just a thought. You could live in a tax-free house. Charlie's word of advice for the day, hey? I just thought I'd have a bit of fun with that, Dylan. But he's shown us, Trump has shown us, that and you have to bury them legally. You can't just whack them over the head and bury them without doing it. It has to be done properly. There's a lot of you who would love to whack them over the head and put them in the ground. I know. I used to be like that when I was younger. But use common sense, okay? But you can do it properly. You can bury them properly, and they're not going to harm you. Their name isn't Jesus. They're not going to come out raised from the dead. They're going to stay there. Okay, so just live in peace, knowing they're okay. They're down there, and they're down there because you're not paying any tax. They will rest very peacefully. Sorry, Dylan, but I just thought I'd mention that because that was 4 years ago that Trump did that.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, Charlie, you are advanced in the sovereignty process, I would say. In this diagram, you're one of the few people I could even talk to about this that I can say that you are on like the upper scale of proceeding through this process, that we're halfway through now with that off-gridder. But in terms of that strategy, the burial for property tax negation strategy, that's just one of ways to turn your property into essentially a 501c3 nonprofit. And on that list of other types of nonprofit organizations, and I'm not sure this is for America, I'm sure it's similar in European countries, but you'd have to double check. I didn't look into every country, the legality of these things, but on the list of other types of nonprofits would be churches, which if you don't want to be a church necessarily, that's the same thing as a meditation center. In terms of other types of spiritual centers, or obviously a synagogue or a Islamic, a mosque. Other types would be charities, government-owned land, cemeteries, which is what the burial falls under, hospitals, or other types of healing centers, I'm sure, NGOs, schools, agricultural buildings. That's pretty much the list. And so if you can fall into any of those categories, and even just thinking about my own property, I have a healing room with red light. I could claim to be a hospital. I have all these diagrams. Like I could claim to be a school. I could claim to be a meditation center. So it's like, if I wanted to file as a 501c3, I could. I'm not sure if you can claim to be like multiple ones at once, if that would help your claim or hurt it. But to think about those things, if you were to file for a 501c3 or a 508c1a is the other slightly variant on that. You could be any of those things and claim property tax exemption. Now, you might have to go through a few inspection processes, but ultimately, there's a lot of options out there for property tax. And so,
well, that's also why there's people buried in Westminster Abbey in London. Beautiful place, prime location in London, tax-free. Buckingham Palace, tax-free. Windsor Castle, tax-free. Lots of people buried there. Dead easy when you know how.
It's all about doing it right, too, doing it properly. And of course, they'll try to stick you too, and making sure you pass the inspection, because otherwise. But it's like if everybody did it, will they be able to get to inspecting everyone's property? So that's another thing. It's like you have to look at the numbers too, and it's a numbers game with income tax as well. So let's move on here. From the off-gridder. If you want the sovereignty, but you still want to be part of society. You move into this section, which I call the beneficiary, is when you start working within the system, but the system works for you. And so let me get back to over here. As the beneficiary, let's see here. You're essentially starting to use the legal system to work for you. And one of the most important features of this diagram is this illustration right here of this three-dimensional pyramid, cube, and dodecahedron that represent the trust, the foundation, and the LLC. And a lot of this theory I actually learned and got data about from an Instagram account that is now deleted. That's unfortunately is listed on the diagram as like the alternative to IRS.com. It says follow at wealth.og on Instagram. And I put this diagram out in like February this year. And unfortunately, that Instagram account has now been deleted, which confirms to me that a lot of the information that it was putting out was actually valid and accurate. And it was giving detailed information about how the elite structure their finances through things like this, through trust, foundations, and LLC. So currently, I'm only at the LLC stage. So my next stage would be like creating a foundation, and then the final stage is creating a trust on top of that, putting all those things into the trust, which makes you essentially legally untouchable. Being this beneficiary type requires funding. So this would require you to have, significantly like a successful business, to be an entrepreneur. But ultimately, like that's what you want. You don't want to be working for someone else's business. You want to be the entrepreneur. You want to be the business owner, and then structure your assets in this way so that you're legally protected. So both the top and bottom illustrations on this diagram represent similar variants of legal sovereignty within the system. The top illustration represents, sorry, I'm reading a little bit of the blurb that I wrote for this just because it is the most succinct way to phrase these things. The top illustration represents what you can consider more like new money, represented by the yacht and the Burj Al Arab in Dubai, versus the bottom illustration, which represents more like old money in the sovereign. And finding one's niche within the system is key to succeeding as an entrepreneurial sovereign, being granted diplomatic immunity. And so, yeah, like I said, these two illustrations represent sort of similar variants on the same concept. This is like the new money, and this is like the old, like legacy money. And as new money, you want to structure your businesses and your bank accounts and the way you work more like how the old money does it. And a big part of that, Charlie, like you said, is utilizing our entire world, the international system, and the laws in different countries to help you get there. And so, a lot of people, like you said, are basing their businesses in Dubai because it's an income tax haven. One of my favorite crypto influencers, Ido Farinha, is in the process of moving his residency to Croatia for tax reasons. And that's a lot of also what that Instagram account wealth.og was instructing people to do, was utilize countries like Singapore for banking, Monaco for residence. Even if you're just purchasing say a little tiny apartment, just to say you have a footprint there, that can really help you in this sovereignty journey of becoming essentially an international citizen is one of the biggest keys that I have found in this sovereignty process. And so to back up here a little bit, and we can go into a little more detail after that, but in whole, you can see the whole diagram as an evolution beginning at 7 a.m. with the straw man and breaking free from the matrix to become the off-gridder, in the upper left, then evolving into the beneficiary and achieving the supreme status as the sovereign in the bottom right. The jump from off-gridder to beneficiary does require some success in business and the generation of substantial financial means, but no one ever said that freedom comes without a price. Mm-hmm. How to create that financial abundance in a system rigged against small businesses and compartmentalized by secret handshake clubs, nepotism, and backdoor deals without compromising one's integrity, that is the challenge of the entrepreneur. And that this diagram will cost a lot more if I had a fail-proof secret strategy in that area to share with you. But I wish everyone the best of luck on this journey. And so I'll also say that the main feature of this diagram, which is slightly blurred here, but I'm happy to go into any of these. We've already actually gone into some of the most important ones. Strategies is this comparative list down the center, which essentially compares the lifestyle. It's not really strategies, it's like what you fall into of the straw man, which is essentially, being born into admiralty law. And this is divided into different sections of financial, legal, home, spiritual, and vehicular areas. So like having a driver's license, and spiritual, like being loyal to the king or the president, and the home, paying property tax. And then it gives you various strategies on the sovereign side as well. And on this diagram, it lists essentially, it's like a 1-for-1. But if you get actually this poster from me, it comes with an expanded list where it doesn't just give you one, but it gives you several other options there in terms of, what's the alternative for bank accounts or paying property tax or paying income tax. This whole thing comes with, I'll do like a little switch in my screen share here to show you. Let's see. So yes, we have this as a mini poster and a big poster. But either one comes with what's called the Sovereignty Certificate Compendium Packet. And in the compendium packet, you get this list here that expands on that main. That was my original download for this diagram, was that comparative strawman versus sovereign chart. Essentially a 2-column Excel file, and then expanding on that. So this has become a 4-column Excel file, just going into more details about the difference between the two various strategies. So that's the brief overview, and I'm wondering what you think, Charlie. Do you think that sounds accurate? It definitely sounds like what you've done and what you've already said about basing your businesses in various countries for tax purposes. That's kind of like the ultimate strategy here, is utilizing the variations of international law and becoming an international citizen.
But it's something that's become very clear to me, because it's very easy to look back. My father used to say as a child growing up, an ounce of foresight is worth a ton of hindsight. I can look back now with a ton of hindsight and see why God put me on a certain journey. At the time, Charlie was just trying to get away with paying tax. And that started in 1984, when I moved to Spain, and realized, through somebody telling me, that if I lived in Spain but was a resident in Gibraltar, they could pay me the full amount of money without any tax deductions at all. And because I declared my residency in Gibraltar, I didn't need to live there, I just needed to be a resident there, the same as I am now in Dubai. This was completely above board, and it was within the law. There's always going to be people who don't like it, always. And they don't like it because they didn't think of it. And when you've, even my financial advisor, who I've known for 45 years, has said to me only the other day, I wish I'd listened to you rather than you listening to me. Not that you ever did, in his own words. You never listened to me. Because he gave me advice, and I chose to ignore it, but he's still a friend. And I told him that I thought that my way was better. And his words to me 40 years ago is, you'll get caught one day. And I said, I won't get caught one day, for a simple reason, that I do everything within the law. And I know the law, and I've studied the law. It's like when I moved 400 million in cash. People go, oh, you can't do that. Well, you can. if you declare it. And people say, well, how do you declare it? Well, I go into customs and I discuss with them that I'm moving it from here to here. And generally, the finance minister of the country that I'm moving it from is with me with a signed declaration. And then when I arrive at the destination, either a finance minister or a banking minister will meet me at the airport and clear the customs that way. So it's done within the law. And I have all the documentation to back it up. God put me on this journey to see that side. So as I look back today at why I've done certain things in my life, it becomes very clear. Because it's to help you guys realize that you don't need to pay tax. You don't need to live in the matrix. And you can escape out of it. And I get a verse from scripture every single day, and I publish it from Monday to Friday. But the one today I brought up on purpose to share with my audience. It comes from Proverbs. Proverbs 3, verse 25 and 6. Be not afraid of sudden fear, neither the desolation of the wicked when it cometh, and is coming. For the Lord shall be thy confidence, and shall keep thy foot from being taken. If you hang on to that, you'll have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, weekend, and week, and month and year to come. Because you know that God's got you. It's got you covered. Be not afraid. And there are many people living in fear. And the word here is be not afraid of sudden fear. So there's going to be something that happens suddenly that could be quite scary. Could be. For those people who don't know God. For those, Proverbs 3, verse 25 and 26. For those people who do know God, when something happens, the first thing that you should do is say, God, just show me what you're doing, because what I'm seeing right now doesn't make any sense to me. So when you ask God to show you, God will show you. And then you've got people like Dylan who will map it out for you so you can see it. And I would urge you to go onto Dylan's website and buy some of his maps. Because when you sit there and study them, suddenly you'll see things that Dylan and I maybe have not seen. You'll see it from a different perspective and you go, wow, now I see this, now I see that. Because we all look at it from a different perspective. So, and I use the perspective argument a lot about the sea. If we look at the sea from above, we all have much the same perspective, much the same. You'll have idiots who'll claim something slightly different, but the perspective is the same. But a diver who's 10 meters under the same body of water that you and I are looking at from above has a completely different perspective. And both perspectives are right. And we just have to learn that certain people have different perspectives and to listen. And I watched an interview today between two people that I know. And they disagree. Matt Letitia was one. And he disagreed with a lot of what the interviewer was saying. But they still remain friends. That's quite important. Last week, I had a conversation with somebody where we both disagreed about certain things. We see it from a different perspective. But we still remain good friends. But we see things completely different. I see it from a completely different perspective to what they do. And they say, well, you can't see it from my perspective. No, I can't. But I can see it from mine. And I will listen to your perspective. And you'll listen to mine. You don't agree with me. I don't agree with you. But we'll still remain friends. Because I won't hate you for having a different perspective. That's your view. That's your right. My feeling is that you're wrong. That's my feeling. And your feeling is that I'm wrong. the good thing is we've got time, and time will tell. The only difference between me and that other person is I'm extremely peaceful about my position because I'm connected to God, the God of love, the God of peace, God the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. That's where my peace comes from. These people, that are my friends, don't have that peace. They have anger and bitterness and the craziness against me. And that, to me, tells me everything I want to know. What's happening at the moment in Israel with the way that Netanyahu is behaving shows me exactly who he is. And I did a short video. I don't know if my audience has seen it. I don't know if you saw it, Dylan, but I did a little short the other day that Donald Trump and America wants peace in the Middle East. We all know that. But so does Israel. Israel wants peace. The problem is the peace that Israel wants is a piece of Lebanon, a piece of Egypt, a piece of Saudi Arabia, a piece of all the countries around it. Completely different piece. And when you see that, you smile. Then you realise both sides want peace, but they want a different type of peace. So they can say they want peace and they're telling the truth. But they want a piece of Lebanon and a piece of Egypt and a piece of Palestine and a piece of many other countries. That's not the peace that you and I know and want. And that sort of behaviour tells you who's right and who's wrong. I don't need to read books and study this. It's something that is it comes within. God tells you what sort of peace you look for. You don't look for a piece of another person's land. In fact, that's one of the sins, is to look at somebody else's possession as your own. It's not. That in itself is wrong. So we're living in amazing times, but don't live in fear because the Bible tells you so. And hopefully, I can navigate you through the craziness. And for the people who follow me, who have a logical brain, Dylan has made you a map. And if you go on his website, I'm sure Drew has shared it with you. Go onto his website, get yourself a map, and there's plenty of them, and then you can work it out for yourself. And while Drew suddenly appeared, it would be good to have some questions while we've got Dylan on here. You can turn your mic on because you do look good miming.
Hi guys. Great to see you, Dylan. My first question for you, because I saw in the comments, have you got a map on health?
Actually, we have two maps on health. I was seeing the comments. A lot of people are commenting on my Healing Web, which was my health map from 2019. And I do want to let people know there is the Healing Web 2.0 from, 2024 this came out. So this was an additional, several years of research that is the...
I remember that one.
Yeah, I think we talked about this one a little bit before.
Yeah, we did.
I remember it now.
Gets a little unwieldy, but this is the fold-out version. You can also get it as a poster. But this is really the better healing one, I would say, because it focuses more on holistic. It has more holistic remedies. It has obviously several more years of research into it. And it's less of a comparison between Big Pharma versus holistic medicine versus being all about holistic medicine. And it still has a few Big Pharma remedies sort of as a last resort in some of these remedy sections. But this is the Infinite Life Vortex. It's the 2024 version of Healing Web 2.0. And so I want to make sure people are aware of that, because it's honestly my favorite diagram at this point. And I just keep going back to it. And even that, there's even been healing remedies released since then, like all these peptides, which I'm a little bit unsure about. But the healing is always advancing, and what's available to us publicly. I think the white hats are making more things available to us publicly. But Charlie, just to respond to some of what you said, it is all about different perspectives. And a lot of my diagrams are not just my own perspective. They're essentially all the perspectives out there combined into one. I may insert a little bit of my subjective input, but with a lot of these, it's not just from one source. That's the other thing. People will be like, well, where's the Corey Good information or stuff? I go for things that are multi-source and combine them and put them all in one piece of paper and see, let the viewer decide. They look at everything and to see which sort of theories or whatnot resonate the most. And so, one other thing I'll say with the sovereignty diagram, again, it's not legal advice. It's somewhat sticky territory because if you do things wrong, it can get you in legal trouble. And that's actually the final section of the diagram shows a little man in jail and says that, this isn't legal advice, do your own research. But I want to mention that this was one of the the sovereignty diagram was one of the most difficult diagrams for me to research. And that in the process of looking into what other people out there were putting out on the internet, I came across a lot of real, I would say, just shit information. And I even purchased, packets and information from various websites that ended up being completely useless. And a few of those that I'll mention that I don't recommend would be freedomfromgovernment.org, Tools for Freedom, store.com, hisadvocates.org. Those are actually some of the main ones you'll run into when you start researching sovereignty online. And from looking into those sites and even purchasing materials from them, I would say just don't waste your time. Not to say that this is like the ultimate one, mine is the ultimate, but I really try to do my best to put out like the good information that will actually help people and not, tell you to get your property tax bill and try to transform it into like a money order by like putting pen marks all over it. We mentioned that, but it's not recommended. And so you got to be careful out there and use your common sense and really utilize the ultimate strategy, like we said, is utilizing international law and legal frameworks and 501c3s to do things legally and not get into trouble. Because the last thing we want is for people to get in jail for, tax avoidance or whatever they call it. Mm-hmm. Those are the things I'll just throw in there. And any other questions would be great.
Okay, well, I've got a great question from Bob. Dylan, I have the large Great Awakening map for several years now. Would you consider an upgraded map that shows a contrast between what has been exposed versus what has not, based on the facts?
Okay, so this is a controversial subject. I gotta let people know the diagram that says the Great Awakening in the middle and the Great Solar Flash big at the top was not one that I created. I put out my first infographic, the QWeb, in January 1st, 2018. About 5 months later, that Great Awakening map came out, and that was by another artist that I believe he said he was inspired by David Wilcock's Cosmic Disclosure and the information of Corey Good and Gaia TV. And that one seemed to kind of try to steamroll mine, actually. And I supported his work for about the first year until I got sort of like a deep state vibe. Like this was not just another artist that was kind of doing the same type of infographic work as me, but it was actually an attempt by either the artist or the deep state to actually like subvert my work. And while I was banned on Instagram and YouTube and everywhere, this guy's account was just let free to expand. And so he's now at like something like 300,000 subscribers on Instagram. But the point being, I did not create the Great Awakening map. I created the QWeb. And all the other ones you'll see on my site. I'll do a quick little screen share here so you can see most of the ones that I actually made. These are all the ones that I made. You don't see the one that's all about the Great Solar Flash here, because that diagram, honestly, it has a lot of bunk information on it. And so I'm all about cross-referenced information, declassified information, and giving people really solid, good advice, not making future predictions about a potential great solar flash that's going to just fix all of our problems in one solar flare. So I'll let him know about that. In terms of, am I going to update these things? Yes, they're constantly being updated, especially if I'm doing a new printed edition. If I'm printing a new edition of any of these, I make sure to look it over and see if there's anything that needs to be added or adjusted, which typically there's not anything that needs to be adjusted. But if something needs to be added, typically something needs to be removed because they are so full, so packed with information. So if you guys just please know that, the other map is sold at greatawakening.co by 5D Awakening Consciousness, and I am DSMP Nexus, and I am DSMP.io. And so please know the difference between the two competing map makers. And personally, I believe I'm the superior one, but we won't compare maps at this point. I mean, I liked his for a while, but let's make that known, please.
We're right behind you, Dylan. Don't worry. My next question, Dylan, if you were to make a map of Earth, Terra, what are the continents you would list? How many names and how big would it be?
Of Terra. So I'm not actually a flat earther myself. I'm open to a lot of different theories in terms of if there is continents beyond what has been disclosed to us. Personally, I lean more towards like a hollow earth type of theory. I really resonated with the book The Coming Race about the Virilia and societies and civilizations that may exist beneath us. And I also somewhat believe in, ancient legends about Agartha and Hyperborea and lands that are essentially not disclosed to us, whether they're on the interior or just not listed on the map somewhere in the ocean, or maybe beyond the North Pole, just more territory that hasn't been disclosed. But I'm not, I very much dislike the map you see floating around online that shows essentially the circular map of our world with the ice wall around it and then all these different continents around that. Like, I don't believe it's like that. I think that our map is generally accurate, but there may be areas that are not disclosed publicly, especially a lot of islands that are not disclosed publicly, like a lot of Epstein-type islands that are not disclosed publicly. And so I wouldn't say that I necessarily believe there's other continents existing currently, but definitely islands. And that's where I'm at, and I stay flexible. I don't say I concretely believe that it's a hollow earth, that it's not a flat earth or anything like that. But I'm just saying, until I see it personally, I like to have empirical evidence or, things that I've observed personally myself. And so I'm very much looking forward to one day being able to do some space tourism or, high altitude tourism, if you don't believe in space, just to see for myself what's actually out there. But currently that's where I'm at. My maps are not necessarily typically geographical. I do have, someone mentioned Tartaria in the comments. I would like to one day do more of an exploration into Tartaria, which is the idea that there was a sort of like Pan-Asian empire, possibly even extending to America. I support these theories, or I am interested in these theories that a lot of our state capitol buildings and a lot of these other buildings that sort of mismatch the architecture of what you would necessarily consider for like a horse and buggy. Looks like I lost my camera here for a second. But, the idea that there was an empire that built a lot of our architecture, and now it has, there we go, that we've reutilized these buildings and repurposed these buildings that were built by a previous empire. That's something I definitely support and am interested in investigating. So I hope that answers the question.
I think on the same subject there, that these are what's happening at the moment is preparing us, and I was prepared, started to be prepared from 1983, but the preparation changed its dynamic in 2019 to the fact that most of what we've been told was a lie. Most of what we've been told, and that's how I was prepared. Now, I shared something this morning, and this is something you can all research. In 1974, so not so long ago, I was 14 years old in 1974, Citroën, a French company, bought out a car that ran on just common old water. And you could drive that for 1,600 kilometers on a tank full of water. And the person who bought that out was killed. The company was banned from ever publishing anything. All the evidence of that was destroyed. And now we're back to square one, where Mazda and Toyota in the last 12 months have come out with hydrogen cars. Now with Mazda, They've also, because for back in the 80s, I remember when Mazda brought out an engine that made me laugh by the name of it, because it was called a Wankel engine. And as a little boy growing up, you hear the word Wankel, and you're like, okay, that's a funny word. I like that. So Mazda brought out the Wankel engine back in the 80s, and now they brought it back in 2020s so that it actually generates electricity to charge the motor for electric cars. But they're also working on a hydrocell as well. But the one thing we do know for sure, and Trump has the evidence, is that Nikola Tesla had all of the patents for this 150 years ago. Now, when you talk about the map of the Earth as a dish, if you like, I've always said it's flound, because it won't change my life if it's round or flat. It makes no difference to me. It just made a bit of sense. There was a number of things that I looked at when I did my study, and I did about 500 hours of study. Antarctica has been visited by hundreds, if not thousands, of people. There are a group of people, 80 countries, that went through the gap in the ice wall in 2025. 80 different countries, 80 different ships, and none of them will come back yet. We've lost communication with them. What's out there? I don't know. I've no idea. Is it other continents? Is it other islands? Is it something else? I don't know. I'd like to think so. If you listen to Admiral Byrd's account, there is. But I never met Admiral Byrd. All I know is I've read the book. Now, did Admiral Byrd write that book, or did somebody else write it in his name? I don't know. And this is one of the most beautiful times of life, because a lot of this stuff we don't know. I go along with Dylan. There is something more underneath the ocean that we know nothing about. Tartaria. Again, they've tried to hide it. They've tried to hide all the information. The minute they try and hide something, I'm onto it. Why did they take all the bells away from the churches? Because they were healing people. Why did they take all the copper and brass out of hospitals? Because they were healing people. Why did they take the sun lounges out of hospitals? Because they were healing people. There was no money in that. All these things are just to open. And my father, God rest his soul, used to say to me, and I think I've shared this with you, that when a chick is coming out of an egg, a young kid will always try and help the chick out. Don't do that. The chick needs the strength to break out of the egg to survive. All we're here to do is crack the egg. When people open it up themselves, they'll find out what's going on. There is so much to find out right now. And I will tell you right now that the answer to all of the questions is not on Google. It's not on Siri or Alexa or ChatGPT. The answer is within. And if you're connected to God, your creator, the hand in you that's the glove, if you're connected to the hand within you, that's where you find the answers. And when you find the answers, the first thing you find is peace. Because it makes sense. The truth always makes sense. So when Elon Musk has fired rockets into space, and the furthest he can go straight up is 92 miles before he hits a wall of water, why? Why? I was led to believe as a child growing up, space went on forever and ever, and rockets kept going up. Elon Musk is master rocket man, and we thought he came from North Korea, but rocket man is Elon Musk. He can only go 92 miles before he hits a wall of water. That's factual. They've got hard evidence of that. This is why when the NASA rocket takes off, it goes round. They go, oh no, it has to circumnavigate. BS. If it was going to go somewhere, it goes straight up there, wouldn't it? Why would it circumnavigate? We just believe the bullshit. We have to learn to use common sense. None of us actually know because none of us have been in that rocket. We're just taking what we're told. And when I came out of the religious cult in 1984, because I'd been brainwashed, or indoctrinated as it's called, I suddenly found there was even more bullshit out there than there was before. So you need to stay connected to what's within you to find out the truth. And there was a lot of insiders here that know the truth because they've connected to who they really are, and they've connected to their creator, and that's where the answers are.
Indeed. Well, I think we're coming up to 11 a.m.
Oh, we are.
I
well,
do want
Dylan,
to say thanks so much for having me, Charlie. It's been great to catch up with you as always.
Yeah, you too. And please, if I would urge all of you to get one of Dylan's maps. Go online. He's got his website there. Get his map because it'll help you join up the dots. And Dylan's put so much work in. People like Dylan deserve our support. So please get yourself a map. Have a look at it. Study it. Choose one that you feel that you would benefit from, because then it'll be beneficial to everyone. But I'll thank you all. Thank you, Dylan, and thank you, Drew. These are the facts, not put out by mainstream media. If you want to know the truth, we put out the truth every single day, Monday to Friday. So if you want to know the truth, come to charlieward.com and see real news daily. And join the Insiders Club, which is live on Wednesdays and Saturdays.
Global tensions are rising, markets are unstable, and currencies keep losing value. While governments print more money, smart investors are moving into physical gold and silver, assets that have protected wealth for centuries. That's why more people are turning to Charlie's Gold to secure their future before the next financial shakeup hits. Don't leave your wealth exposed. Own something real. Own gold and silver. Visit charlies.gold today.